Natalie nodded, a tear slipping from her eye. Yes, for walking away, for forcing me to face myself. It hurt, but it was the wake-up call I needed, she said softly. Hey, are you okay? I couldn't make this up. And that's a true story that was shared by the victim on Reddit, receiving many sincere comments and shares from strangers. Listen to the story and see if you can give them valuable feedback. The morning sun poured through the chapel's wide, arched windows, casting a golden hue over the crowd of smiling faces. The day seemed perfect, like something out of a fairy tale, with every detail carefully crafted. Natalie, the bride, glided down the aisle in a dress that shimmered with every movement, her veil trailing behind her like a soft whisper, elegant and ethereal. Alex stood at the altar, heart racing with anticipation. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the cuffs of his tailored suit. Ethan, his best man, leaned in, giving him a reassuring pat on the back. Relax, he whispered with a grin. She's walking toward you, not away from you. Alex laughed softly, the tension lifting momentarily, but his nerves were still there. He had imagined this day countless times, visualizing every detail, but nothing prepared him for the sight of Natalie approaching him, her smile lighting up the entire room. In that moment, all his doubts, all his fears melted away. The ceremony unfolded flawlessly, with vows exchanged, tears shed, and applause echoing throughout the chapel as Alex and Natalie became husband and wife. Their kiss sparked a cheer from the guests, their hands tightly clasped, a symbol of their unbreakable bond. The reception was held in a grand ballroom, the ceilings high and majestic, chandeliers glittering above. The tables, adorned with fresh flowers and golden accents, filled the air with a buzz of laughter and clinking champagne glasses. Alex couldn't stop grinning as he moved through the crowd, exchanging congratulations with friends and family. Natalie was by his side, her laughter contagious, her beauty radiant. Then came the toasts. Ethan, the best man, took the microphone and delivered a speech full of wit and heartfelt sincerity. Alex, he began, raising his glass, you've always had it all. The job, the looks, the charm. And now you've found Natalie, the one thing you were missing, a partner who makes you better in every way. To Alex and Natalie, Ethan finished. May your life together be as beautiful as today. The room erupted in applause, and Alex clinked his glass against Natalie's, their eyes meeting in a shared moment of joy. The evening continued with music and dancing, laughter filling the air. Alex was pulled onto the dance floor by friends, relatives, and a few eager bridesmaids. It was during one of these dances that Natalie whispered to him, I'm going to slip upstairs for a moment to freshen up. Alex, distracted by the festivities, smiled and nodded. I'll be down here to toast us some more, he joked, earning a soft laugh from her as she walked away. What Alex didn't know was that Ethan had been watching Natalie closely all evening. His confident smile masked the tension he felt, and as Natalie made her way toward the stairs, he hesitated for a moment before following her, his expression unreadable. When Natalie reached the bridal suite, she paused at the door, leaning against it for a moment, her heart racing. The day had been flawless, yet an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. There was something she couldn't shake. The soft knock on the door startled her, and she opened it to find Ethan standing there, his hands in his pockets, his usual grin replaced with a serious expression. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice low. Ethan stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, closing the door behind him. I just wanted to check on you, he said softly, his gaze intense. You seemed off earlier. I'm fine, Natalie responded quickly, crossing her arms in an attempt to protect herself. It's just a lot, you know? The day, the people, the expectations. Ethan took a step closer, his eyes locking onto hers. You don't have to pretend with me, Natalie. I know you. Her breath caught, and for a moment, the tension in the room thickened. Downstairs, Alex was laughing with a group of friends, raising his glass in another toast. He glanced occasionally toward the staircase, wondering when Natalie would return. But the warmth of the crowd, the music, and the champagne kept his concerns at bay. The minutes stretched on, growing heavier with each passing second. The music from downstairs grew fainter as Natalie sat in the bridal suite, her thoughts swirling, tangled, and hard to make sense of. The perfect wedding, the perfect day, and yet she couldn't shake the gnawing sense that something was terribly wrong. Her heart raced, not from excitement, but from an overwhelming uncertainty she couldn't quite explain. Downstairs, Alex continued to mingle, his laughter echoing across the ballroom, but an unshakable feeling of discomfort had begun to creep into his chest. He excused himself from the crowd, telling himself it was nothing, but as he made his way up the staircase, his instincts began to stir. He reached the landing, his thoughts scattered, his concern growing as the minutes ticked by. Something was wrong. He had no idea what, but the day, perfect on the surface, was already starting to unravel. Meanwhile, Natalie sat alone on the edge of the bed, the bridal suite now feeling strangely cold despite the warmth of the day. She glanced around, almost waiting for a sign to tell her what she should feel. This was her wedding day, the culmination of years of dreams. And yet, all she could feel was the weight of her own doubts. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. She stood quickly, her breath catching in her throat, expecting Alex. But when she opened the door, it was Ethan standing there. He looked different than usual, his cocky grin replaced with a seriousness that made her heart beat a little faster. "You disappeared," he said quietly, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "I just wanted to check on you." Natalie stepped back to let him in, nodding quickly. "I'm fine," she assured him, though her voice lacked conviction. "I just needed a moment." Ethan stepped inside, his eyes taking in the room, then settling on her with a look that made her feel seen in a way Alex never had. He shut the door gently behind him and sat beside her on the bed, maintaining enough space to give her comfort, yet drawing her closer with his presence. "It's a big day," he said, his tone lightening as he tried to ease the tension. "I get it. All eyes on you. Everyone expecting you to be the perfect bride." Natalie let out a small, hollow laugh, looking down at her hands. "It's not just that," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "It's everything. The pressure, the expectations. It's overwhelming." Ethan shifted closer, his voice soft but insistent. "You don't have to pretend with me, Natalie. I know you better than that." Her heart raced at the sincerity in his words. He was right. Ethan had always known her in a way no one else had. He had been there through everything, the good and the bad, watching from the sidelines as she built a life that was supposed to be perfect. What was it? "You're lucky," Ethan said after a pause, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Lucky. Alex is a good man," he continued, his voice gentler now. "The best, really. He'd do anything for you." "I know," she whispered, the guilt thick in her chest. She turned away slightly, her eyes avoiding his as she tried to collect her thoughts. Ethan's voice shifted, growing more earnest. "Do you really know, though?" The question hit her harder than she expected. She swallowed, trying to push the lump from her throat, but her mind was reeling. "I do," she said, though it felt untrue, as though she was trying to convince herself. Ethan leaned closer, his words carrying a weight that hung in the air between them. "Are you happy, Natalie? Are you truly happy?" Natalie's breath hitched. The question was simple, but it was more profound than anything anyone had ever asked her. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. How could she answer that when everything about her life had seemed perfect, and yet it wasn't? "I love Alex," she said finally, her voice shaking. "He's everything I ever wanted." But her words faltered, and she looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "But," Ethan pressed gently, his voice soft but probing. "But sometimes," she whispered, tears threatening to spill, "I feel like I'm not enough for him." The warm sun of the Maldives glinted off the clear waters, the perfect honeymoon destination for a newlywed couple. Alex was blissfully lost in the euphoria of his marriage, believing the love he had with Natalie was as pure and unwavering as the ocean stretching before them. For Natalie, though, every smile, every touch felt like a bitter reminder of the secret she could never escape. While Alex basked in the perfection of their getaway, Natalie fought a battle within herself, one that grew harder with every passing day. She watched him laugh, watch him smile, and felt an overwhelming weight of guilt pressing against her chest. The man she had just married deserved so much more than the woman she had become. She had tried to bury the memory of Ethan's touch, but it lingered, haunting her in moments of quiet solitude. She couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that gnawed at her every time Alex kissed her or whispered sweet words in her ear. The contrast between her love for him and the lingering feelings for Ethan was unbearable. But she played the role of the perfect bride, the perfect wife, because that's what Alex deserved. She reassured him, whispered loving words, and clung to him in the night as though it would make everything right again. Yet deep inside, she knew she had betrayed him in a way that could never be undone. One morning, as they sat together at breakfast overlooking the turquoise waters, Alex mentioned his growing frustration with Ethan. "Ethan's been weird lately," he said, a hint of concern in his voice. "He hasn't returned my calls since the wedding." Natalie stiffened for just a moment before responding, her voice casual but forced. "Maybe he's just busy." Alex gave a small nod, but his unease was palpable. Yeah, maybe. What Alex didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that it wasn't just busy schedules keeping Ethan away. It was guilt. Ethan, too, was trying to escape the mess they had created, avoiding Alex because he couldn't bear the weight of the secret they shared. As the days passed, Alex's suspicions slowly began to mount, but Natalie did everything she could to steer the conversation away from Ethan. She needed this vacation to be perfect. She needed her new life to be flawless, even if it was all built on a lie. She clung to the image of herself as a wife, a partner, someone who could make everything right again. But in the back of her mind, she knew it would only take one misstep, one wrong word, to bring everything crashing down. And deep down, she feared the day Alex would see the cracks in their perfect facade. For now, she played her part, smiling through the pain, hoping against hope that the truth would remain buried, even though it was threatening to rise to the surface with every passing day. The sun was setting as Alex and Ethan sat down at a corner table of their usual bar, the familiar clink of glasses around them filling the air. The evening had a certain weight to it that Alex couldn't quite place. They had always been able to talk about anything, work, relationships, life. But tonight, Ethan seemed distracted, distant, a shell of the friend Alex had known for years. "So," Alex said, trying to break the silence, "how have you been, man? Haven't heard from you much lately. Everything okay?" Ethan shifted in his seat, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "Yeah, just busy, you know," he said, his voice lacking the usual energy it carried. Alex watched him closely. There was something more to it. "You don't seem like your usual self. What's going on?" Ethan hesitated, avoiding Alex's gaze. The words hung between them, unsaid but palpable. Finally, he met Alex's eyes, his face filled with guilt and uncertainty. "Listen, Alex," he began, his voice low. "I don't know how to say this, but I think I owe you an explanation. It's about Natalie." The mention of his wife's name caused a cold not to form in Alex's stomach. He leaned forward, his pulse quickening. "What about her?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his fingers now tapping the table in an erratic rhythm. It's complicated. I don't know what happened, but I messed up, Alex." The word sent a shockwave through Alex. "Messed up? What do you mean? What are you saying?" Alex's voice trembled slightly, not sure if he was ready to hear the answer. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling. "It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking. But I kissed her, Alex. I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to go this far." Alex's world spun, the sounds around him fading into a dull hum. "What?" was all he managed to say, his mind unable to fully grasp what Ethan was confessing. Ethan's eyes were full of regret, his voice breaking as he spoke. "I don't know what happened. It just happened, but it meant nothing. I swear, I can't undo it, and I've been trying to distance myself from her. But I owe you the truth." Alex's hands clenched into fists on the table, his knuckles turning white. "You kissed my wife?" he whispered, more to himself than to Ethan. The words didn't feel real, like they were coming from someone else, someone not in his life. Ethan nodded, the weight of the truth pressing down on both of them. "I'm sorry, Alex. I should have never let it happen, but I couldn't keep lying to you. You deserve to know." Alex's breath came in shallow bursts as he processed the betrayal, his mind reeling. How could you do this to me, Ethan? The pain in his voice was unmistakable. You're my best friend, and she's my wife. My life, man. My entire life. And you. He couldn't finish the sentence, his emotions boiling over, unable to reconcile the man he'd known for so many years with the one sitting across from him now. Ethan seemed to shrink under Alex's gaze, his face twisted with regret. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I never meant to hurt you. But I had to tell you. Alex stood abruptly, pushing his chair back, so forcefully it scraped against the floor. I can't do this right now, Ethan, he said, his voice hoarse. I don't even know what to say to you. Without another word, Alex turned and walked out of the bar, the door swinging shut behind him with a finality that echoed through the empty street. His mind was a whirlwind of rage, disbelief, and heartbreak. He had trusted Ethan. He had trusted Natalie. And in one evening, everything had come crashing down. As he walked through the night, his heart heavy with the weight of betrayal, Alex wondered how he could ever rebuild from this. His marriage, his friendship, everything he had worked so hard to build seemed shattered beyond repair. The road ahead felt uncertain, but one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. The evening started out relaxed, with laughter filling the air, and for a while, it seemed like the good old times. But beneath the surface, something shifted in the energy between the four of them. Alex kept stealing glances at Natalie and Ethan, his suspicions growing with every passing moment. There was an undeniable tension between them, one that couldn't be dismissed as just friendly discomfort or a passing misunderstanding. It was something deeper, something unspoken that clung to the air, thick and palpable. As the night wore on, the group became more scattered. Some of the friends moved to the dance floor, while others lingered around the bar, chatting and laughing. But Alex couldn't tear his eyes away from the dynamic between Ethan and Natalie. They were sitting close, their conversation too quiet for Alex to make out, but their body language said enough. It was almost as if they were in their own little world, ignoring the rest of the group. At one point, Alex caught sight of Ethan's hand brushing against Natalie's arm. The contact seemed innocent enough, but in that moment, it felt charged. Too intimate for friends, too familiar for it to be simply friendly banter. Natalie didn't pull away either, and that small gesture sent a ripple of unease through Alex. He quickly averted his eyes, trying to shake the feeling that had settled in his gut. He had always trusted Ethan. Hell, they'd known each other since college, shared countless memories together. But now, with the way he was acting, Alex couldn't help but question everything. Was he overthinking it? Could it be that he was reading too much into small gestures? But deep down, Alex knew better. His instincts were rarely wrong. As the evening continued, Alex excused himself to get some air. He stepped outside, feeling the cool night air on his face as he tried to collect his thoughts. His heart raced, his mind a whirlwind of doubts and suspicions. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. His marriage, the trust he had with Natalie, was supposed to be built on mutual respect and love. But now, it was as if that foundation had started to crack, and every little piece of evidence, real or imagined, was chipping away at the walls he had built around their life together. Minutes passed, and he finally decided to go back inside. The moment he stepped into the bar again, his eyes immediately sought out Natalie and Ethan. They were now talking more openly, laughing at something between them. But the closer Alex got, the more he noticed how Natalie seemed to be leaning in a little too close to Ethan, her hand resting on the table near his. It was subtle, but it was there. Feeling a knot form in his stomach, Alex approached them. He couldn't help it anymore. "Hey, everything all right here?" he asked, his voice calm, but with an underlying edge. Ethan looked up at him with a forced grin, his usual smooth demeanor faltering for just a split second. "Yeah, man, everything's great. Just catching up," Ethan replied, his voice slightly too casual. Natalie's eyes flickered to Alex, her expression unreadable for a moment. "Are you sure?" Alex pressed, his gaze shifting between the two of them. "Because it seems like you two have been rather cozy tonight." Natalie's face paled, but she quickly recovered, offering him a tight smile. "Alex, don't be silly. It's just a drink with friends," she said, her voice light, but there was a hint of defensiveness there that made Alex's suspicion grow. Ethan cleared his throat awkwardly, shifting in his seat. "Yeah, man, just catching up on old times," he repeated, though it was clear his words lacked conviction. Alex didn't respond right away. Instead, he let the silence hang in the air for a moment, letting his words sink in. There was something not right here, something he couldn't ignore any longer. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady. "But we need to talk, all three of us. Let's go outside." The evening air was colder now, and as they stepped out onto the patio, Alex's mind raced. He needed to know the truth. He couldn't stand living in this uncertainty any longer. "What's going on between you two?" Alex asked, his voice low but firm. Ethan looked at Natalie, his expression pained, as if weighing his words. Natalie, on the other hand, remained silent, her eyes avoiding his. It was the silence that spoke the loudest to Alex, and he felt a cold wave of realization wash over him. He had been blind, but now the pieces were falling into place. The tension, the secrecy, the way they had been avoiding him. It all made sense. "So, it's true," Alex said quietly, his voice thick with hurt. "Something's been going on between you two." Natalie swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she finally met Alex's eyes. "Alex, I don't know how it happened. I never meant for this to happen. It's my fault." Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady but regretful. "I never meant to hurt you, Alex. This was a mistake. It shouldn't have happened, and I'm sorry. But I swear, it wasn't intentional." Alex felt a surge of emotions flood through him. Anger, betrayal, sadness. But the most overwhelming of all was the ache in his chest. "You both knew how much I trusted you. How much I trusted you both. And this is what you've done." Natalie reached out to him, her hand hovering just inches from his. "Alex, please. I love you. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. It won't happen again." But Alex stepped back, shaking his head, the finality of the situation settling in. "I don't think I can ever look at you the same way again, Natalie. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't even know if I want to." Ethan and Natalie stood in the silence, their faces marked with regret. But Alex knew that nothing would ever be the same. The trust had been shattered beyond repair, and no amount of apologies could change that. As Alex turned to walk away, his heart heavy with the weight of it all, he realized that he had reached the end of this chapter in his life. There would be no going back, only forward, and it was time to start rebuilding, piece by painful piece. The air in the room felt suffocating, the weight of the truth pressing down on both of them. Alex stood there, his mind numb with disbelief, watching as Natalie crumbled before him. The woman he had married, the one he thought he knew so well, was now a stranger, caught in a lie that tore their world apart. His heart, once so full of love, now felt hollow. Every moment of their life together, every promise, every plan for the future seemed to slip through his fingers like sand. She had betrayed him, not just with another man, but with his best friend. The depth of the betrayal was almost too much to comprehend. "I'm so sorry, Alex," Natalie sobbed, her voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt you. I swear it was a mistake. I don't know how it happened, but it was a mistake." Alex didn't respond immediately. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. The wedding night, their perfect day, now tainted by the weight of her confession. How had it come to this? He had trusted her, believed in her, and now everything was shattered. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "A mistake," he repeated bitterly, the words tasting like poison on his tongue. "You call it a mistake, but this isn't something that just happens. You didn't slip and fall into his arms. You made a choice, Natalie. You made a decision to be with him. On our wedding night." Her sobs intensified, but Alex couldn't bring himself to comfort her. There was nothing she could say that would undo the damage she had done. "I don't know what to say to you," he said quietly, his voice trembling with emotion. "I loved you, Natalie. I trusted you. And you betrayed me. You destroyed everything we had." She reached out to him, her hand trembling as she tried to touch his arm, but Alex pulled away. "Please don't," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you. I don't know if I want to." The silence that followed was deafening. Natalie's cries filled the space between them, but Alex stood frozen, his heart breaking with every sob. He wanted to leave, wanted to walk away from this nightmare, but he couldn't. He was trapped in this moment, forced to confront the painful reality of what had happened. "You've ruined us," Alex repeated, his voice raw. "You've ruined everything, and I don't know how to come back from this." Natalie sank to her knees, her hands pressed to her face as she sobbed uncontrollably. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I swear I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But Alex couldn't hear her anymore. The words were empty, hollow, just like the love he once felt for her. He had spent so much of his life trusting her, believing that they were meant to be. Now all of it was gone. There was no going back. With a final, broken look, Alex turned and walked out of the room. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stay in that house any longer, couldn't look at the woman who had shattered his heart. The door slammed shut behind him, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. As he stepped out into the cold night, Alex knew that this was the end. Their marriage was over, and so was the life he had thought they would share. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He had to move forward without her. Alex's voice was steely and low, each word cutting deeper than the last. The room felt suffocating, the tension between the two men palpable as Ethan stood frozen, unable to meet Alex's gaze. Alex's chest heaved with anger, but it was the hurt that burned brightest in his eyes. "You didn't just hurt me, Ethan," Alex continued, his voice growing steadier despite the storm inside him. "You betrayed me in a way I can't even describe. You were my best friend, my brother in all but blood, and you did this to me. To both of us." Ethan's face twisted with remorse, but there was nothing left to say that could undo what had been done. The silence between them was deafening, filled only by the ticking of the clock on the wall, marking the passing of moments that Alex knew would haunt him forever. "I didn't want it to happen," Ethan murmured, the words barely a whisper. "I swear it was a stupid, reckless mistake. I never meant for any of this, for you to find out like this. I wish I could take it all back." But Alex wasn't listening. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, none of them good. Every memory of friendship, of laughter, of trust, now felt like a distant dream. The anger had started to dissipate, replaced by a dull, aching resignation. "You can't undo it, Ethan," Alex said quietly. "You can't erase it. You took something from me that I can never get back." Ethan opened his mouth to say something more, but Alex held up a hand to stop him. He had no more words left for him, no more forgiveness to give. His heart felt heavy, drained, and he knew that whatever came next, whether it was reconciliation, distance, or something else, things would never be the same. "I need you to leave," Alex said, his voice calm but firm. "I need space. I can't look at you right now." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding the weight of the request. He turned, his back to Alex, and moved toward the door, his footsteps heavy, as if carrying the weight of his own guilt with every step. "I'm so sorry, Alex," Ethan said one last time before closing the door behind him. Alex stood there, staring at the spot where his best friend had just been. The silence felt louder now. The betrayal had cut through him deeper than he expected, but more than the hurt, it was the loss. The loss of trust, the loss of the friendship that once meant the world to him. Alex turned around, pacing the room, needing to release the tension in his chest. He felt lost, as though everything he had built, everything he had trusted, was now slipping through his fingers. He needed to find something solid again, something to hold on to, but for the first time in his life, Alex wasn't sure what that was anymore. It was over. This chapter of his life, with all its love and trust and hopes for the future, was finished. What came next, Alex had no idea. But the journey to rebuild would begin now, with or without Ethan, with or without Natalie. The road ahead was unknown, but he would walk it, one painful step at a time. Natalie's voice trembled as she spoke, the weight of her words sinking into the room. The silence that followed felt heavy, yet strangely soothing, as if the very act of admitting her mistakes was the first step toward healing. "I betrayed my husband and my best friend," she continued, her eyes flickering with a mix of shame and sorrow. "I broke something that I thought was unbreakable, and now I'm not sure how to fix it." Dr. Ayres leaned forward slightly, her expression gentle but focused. "It's important that you're here, Natalie," she said softly. "Acknowledging the hurt you've caused is never easy, but it's the first step in understanding yourself and the choices you've made. What do you think caused you to act this way?" Natalie closed her eyes, feeling a lump form in her throat. She had been replaying that night over and over in her mind, trying to make sense of her actions. The guilt was suffocating, yet she knew that no amount of regret could undo what had been done. Still, she needed to find a way to live with it. "I was scared," Natalie whispered. "Scared that I wasn't good enough for Alex, that I couldn't live up to the person he thought I was. And then Ethan, he was there. He listened. He made me feel like I mattered again." She paused, her voice faltering. "I let it happen because I was too weak to say no." Dr. Ayres nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like you were looking for validation, for reassurance, but in a way that wasn't healthy. You didn't feel worthy of the love Alex gave you, so you sought it elsewhere. But now, you're facing the consequences of those actions. How do you feel about taking responsibility for them?" Natalie's eyes welled with tears, the floodgates opening once more. "I feel like I've destroyed everything I had. Alex doesn't even want to look at me, and Ethan, I've lost him too. I don't know if I can fix what I've done. Fixing it will take time," Dr. Ayres replied gently. "But the first step is forgiving yourself. It's clear you're hurting, but self-punishment will only keep you stuck. If you want to move forward, you need to begin with compassion for yourself." The words lingered in the air, the truth in them echoing deep within Natalie's chest. She had been running from her guilt for so long, drowning in it, but maybe, just maybe, there was a way to face it, to heal. But it wouldn't be easy. It would take time, and it would take patience. That afternoon, for the first time in days, Natalie felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she could rebuild. Maybe she could find a way back to herself. And if it was possible, maybe one day she could find a way back to Alex. But she knew now that it had to start with her. It had to start with the woman staring back at her in the mirror. As Natalie gazed at the photo, a mix of warmth and pain washed over her. That moment, frozen in time, felt like a different life, a time when everything seemed so simple, so perfect. She could almost hear Alex's laughter again, the sound so familiar, so comforting. It was a reminder of the love they had shared, a love she had broken. But now, looking at the photo, she realized that love wasn't just about those perfect moments. It was about growth, change, and making amends. And although she had broken his trust, she had also begun to rebuild herself, step by painful step. Placing the photo gently on the table, she let out a deep breath. It had taken time, but she was learning to forgive herself. She couldn't change the past, but she could control her actions moving forward. If Alex ever decided to come back into her life, she would be a better version of herself. But if he didn't, she could hold her head up high, knowing she had done the hard work of healing. As the months passed, Natalie continued to pour her energy into personal growth. She learned to value herself beyond the mistakes she had made. She found new purposes in helping others, in connecting with people, and in healing the wounds of her past. Therapy, though difficult at times, gave her the tools to confront her fears and embrace the uncomfortable truths about herself. And yet, even with all the growth, there were days when the loss felt unbearable. There were still moments when the ache of Alex's absence seemed too much to bear, when she longed for his touch, his smile, the life they had once envisioned together. But those moments became less frequent as she started living for herself for the first time in years. Then, one crisp fall evening, as she was walking home from volunteering, she received a call. It was Alex. Her heart skipped a beat as she answered, holding her breath. "Hi." His voice came through, soft but steady. "It's me." Natalie felt the weight of those two words. And for a moment, all the pain, all the time spent apart, seemed to converge into this single moment. "Alex," she whispered. I've been thinking," he interrupted gently, "and I'm not sure what comes next. I'm not asking for answers today, but I think we need to talk." Tears welled in Natalie's eyes. not from desperation or regret, but from the unexpected sense of hope. "I'm here," she said, her voice steady. "Whenever you're ready." And for the first time in a long while, Natalie felt like she was on the path to something new. Not to the woman she had been before, but to the woman she was becoming. Whatever happened, she knew she had finally started to heal. Alex listened as Lily shared updates about her work and life. But his mind often drifted, still clouded by the storm of his own emotions. She spoke with the easy, familiar rhythm of their friendship, but each word made him feel like a stranger in his own life. When there was a lull in the conversation, Lily leaned forward, her eyes searching his. "How are you really doing, Alex?" she asked, her voice soft but insistent. Alex stared at his coffee, unsure of how to answer. He'd been going through the motions of recovery, following Ryan's advice to keep moving forward. But the truth was, he felt as if he were floating, disconnected from everything around him. "I don't know," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "Some days I feel like I'm getting better, like I'm making progress. But other days it just hits me all over again." Lily nodded, her expression understanding. "It's okay to feel that way. Healing isn't linear." Alex looked up at her, surprised by her words. "You sound like you've been through this before." "I have," she admitted, her gaze turning inward. "I was in a relationship once a long time ago. Things ended badly. I felt lost, like I didn't know who I was without that person. But over time, I realized I had to rebuild myself from scratch. It was painful, but it taught me how strong I really was." Alex took in her words, the quiet strength in her voice making something inside him shift. Maybe he could rebuild too. Maybe he could stop being a victim of his circumstances and start taking control of his own life again. "I know it's hard," Lily continued, "but you don't have to do it alone. You've got people who care about you." Alex nodded, his chest tightening slightly. "I'm trying to figure that out," he said quietly. "Trying to figure out who I am now." Lily smiled gently, as if sensing the weight of his thoughts. "Take your time. There's no rush. Just be kind to yourself." That evening, after their coffee, Alex walked back to Ryan's house, his mind clearer than it had been in weeks. The conversation with Lily had given him a small spark of hope, a reminder that there was more to life than the pain he was holding on to. Maybe, just maybe, he could move forward. In the days that followed, Alex made a conscious effort to keep moving, to keep living. He focused on the small victories, completing his morning runs, journaling more, spending time with Ryan. Slowly but surely, he began to feel the edges of his anger soften. But the ache in his heart remained. He didn't know what the future held or if he and Natalie could ever rebuild what they had. What he did know was that he was on a journey, not just to recover from betrayal, but to rediscover himself and his place in the world. And perhaps, if time allowed, to find peace with the past. Natalie took a deep breath, her hands folding tightly in her lap. "I don't expect forgiveness. Not from you. Not from anyone," she began quietly. "But I've been doing a lot of thinking about everything, about what I did, why I did it, and the person I was when I hurt you." Alex's gaze was steady, but his heart ached at the weight of her words. He had imagined this conversation 1,000 times, but hearing it from her felt different. She wasn't the woman he'd married. She wasn't the woman who had betrayed him. The woman in front of him now seemed fragile, broken in ways that made him question everything he thought he knew. "I let my insecurities control me," Natalie continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I convinced myself that I wasn't enough for you, that you deserved someone better than me. And I took that fear and made a terrible decision, one that I can't undo, one that I'll regret for the rest of my life." Alex shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His mind raced as he processed her words. He had spent months trying to move on, trying to rebuild his life without her, and now here she was, asking for a chance to talk, asking for something he wasn't sure he could give. "I've been in therapy," Natalie added, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not asking you to believe that everything's fixed now, but I'm working on myself. I want to be better. For me. I know I can never change what I did to you, but I needed to say it, needed to tell you that I understand how deeply I hurt you." Alex looked at her, the words she spoke stirring something deep inside him. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, the rawness of her regret. Part of him wanted to reach across the table, to hold her, to somehow undo the damage. But another part of him remained distant, wary of reopening wounds that had taken so much time to heal. "I don't know what to say," Alex finally murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now." Natalie nodded, as if expecting this. "You don't have to say anything," she said softly. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm not asking for us to go back to what we were. I just needed to tell you how sorry I am. I need to say it, even if it doesn't change anything." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The cafe around them buzzed with quiet chatter, but they were both lost in their thoughts. Alex could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him. The decision to either close the door completely or leave it slightly ajar. He wasn't sure which path was the right one, and in that moment, he realized that he wasn't ready to make that choice. I think I need more time," Alex said quietly, the words feeling like an apology in themselves. "I understand," Natalie replied, her voice soft but resigned. "I don't expect anything more than that." She stood up slowly, and Alex followed suit. He looked at her one last time, searching for some sign of hope in the woman who had once been everything to him. But all he found was a stranger, a woman broken by her own choices, yet still standing. "Take care of yourself, Natalie," he said softly, his voice steady but carrying the weight of years spent together. She gave him a small, sad smile. "I will," she said. "I hope you can find happiness, whatever that looks like." With that, they parted ways. Alex walked out of the cafe and into the world beyond, his heart heavy, but at least a little lighter than before. He didn't know what the future held or if he and Natalie would ever find their way back to each other. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. Not closure, not forgiveness, but peace. And that, for now, was enough. Natalie took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "Over the past few months, I've spent a lot of time trying to understand who I am and how I became someone capable of hurting you," she began, her voice trembling with the weight of her admission. "I've been working on myself through therapy, volunteering, trying to be better, not just for you, but for myself too." She paused, her eyes flickering with vulnerability. "I know I can't undo the damage I caused. I know I broke your trust, and I hate myself for that. But I wanted you to know that I'm not that person anymore. I'm different now, and I'm still changing." Alex's jaw tightened at her words, but he didn't interrupt. He let her speak, the silence between them heavy with years of unresolved pain. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said quickly, meeting his gaze, her eyes earnest. "I don't think I have the right to ask that. I needed you to know how truly sorry I am. I needed you to hear it from me." Alex looked at her, disbelief flickering across his face. "Thank me?" he asked, the words barely leaving his lips in surprise. Natalie nodded, a tear slipping from her eye. "Yes, for walking away, for forcing me to face myself. It hurt, but it was the wake-up call I needed," she said softly. Alex exhaled sharply, the words hanging in the air. He didn't know how to respond. There was a part of him that wanted to lash out, but another part that felt numb, too exhausted to feel anything more. "I don't know what you want me to say," he murmured after a long pause. "I don't want you to say anything," she replied. "I just needed to give you closure if that's something you need. I want you to know that no matter what, I'll respect whatever you decide." Alex studied her for a long time, his heart a mix of conflicting emotions. Anger, sorrow, but something else too, something unfamiliar. Her words were what he had wanted to hear for so long. Her acknowledgement of what she'd done, her apology. But now, as she sat across from him, waiting, he wasn't sure what to feel. "Do you think people can really change?" Alex asked quietly, almost to himself. Without hesitation, Natalie nodded. "Yes, but it's not easy. And it's not quick. I know I have a long way to go, but I'm willing to keep trying." Alex looked down at his coffee, his fingers brushing against the mug. The silence between them stretched longer as he mulled over her words. Could he forgive her? Could he move past the betrayal? Or was this something that would always linger, an unhealable scar on his soul? Finally, he looked up, his gaze meeting hers. "I need time," he said, his voice low but resolute. "I don't know what I want right now. But thank you for saying what you needed to say." A faint, sad smile crossed Natalie's face, and she nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Take all the time you need," she whispered. As Alex left the cafe, the weight on his chest felt a little lighter, but the future remained uncertain. For the first time in a long time, he felt the possibility of healing, not just for himself, but perhaps for them both. The weeks following Alex's meeting with Natalie were filled with introspection. He replayed their conversation over and over in his mind, weighing her sincerity against the betrayal that had once seemed unforgivable. But now, something inside him was shifting. He stood at a crossroads: forgiveness or finality. If he chose forgiveness, it wouldn't be a simple act. It wouldn't erase the past, but it might allow him to move forward. He and Natalie began taking small steps, meeting occasionally for coffee or walks in the park. Their conversations weren't about grand gestures or promises of a renewed relationship. They focused on honesty and setting boundaries. Alex had learned that trust wasn't something you could demand. It was something you earned one step at a time. Their path wasn't without setbacks. There were moments when the pain of the past resurfaced, when doubts crept in, but with each step forward, the walls between them began to crumble. Slowly, cautiously, a glimmer of hope emerged from the rubble. One evening, as they sat on a park bench, watching the sunset together, Alex reached for Natalie's hand. "We'll never be the same," he said quietly, his voice tinged with both sadness and understanding. Natalie nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I know, but maybe we can be something new. Maybe we can find a way to build something better." For the first time in months, Alex felt a glimmer of hope for the future, not as the man he once was, but as the man he could become, with or without Natalie by his side. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like he was heading in the right direction. Alex sat on the porch, a glass of wine in hand, watching the setting sun stretch across the sky. The gentle breeze brushed against his face, carrying with it a sense of calm he hadn't felt in a long time. The pain that had once consumed him was no longer a constant presence. The ache had dulled, replaced by a quiet peace that seemed to grow with each passing day. He had learned a lot about himself in the months following his confrontation with Natalie. He realized that forgiveness wasn't always about reconciling with the other person. It was about freeing himself from the grip of anger and resentment. He didn't have to carry the weight of the betrayal with him any longer. His mornings were spent on runs through the neighborhood, the rhythmic thud of his feet against the pavement providing a sense of grounding, a way to clear his mind and focus on the present. In the evenings, he would sit with a journal, reflecting on the journey he had been on and the person he was becoming. Though he had once thought he needed closure from Natalie, he now understood that the closure he sought had always been within himself. He didn't need to hold on to the past any longer. It was time to move forward, to embrace the life that awaited him. He didn't harbor anger or ill will toward Natalie. He simply accepted that their paths had diverged and there was no turning back. If forgiveness had ever been a part of their story, it was a forgiveness he had given to himself, not because of her actions, but because he knew he deserved to find peace. With each passing day, Alex felt more comfortable in his own skin. The future was wide open, full of possibility. He could rebuild his life on his own terms, without the weight of past mistakes hanging over him. As he lifted his glass to the horizon, a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. The future was full of promise, a fresh start waiting just beyond the horizon. Whatever lay ahead, Alex knew he was ready to face it. To the future, he whispered, his voice steady, a quiet toast to the life he was about to create for himself. And for the first time in months, he felt a deep sense of contentment. Alex sat back, the weight of the past slowly lifting off his shoulders. The horizon before him was a canvas, waiting to be filled with new experiences, new opportunities, and the quiet promise of healing. In the silence of the evening, he realized that he had finally found a sense of peace. Peace not in forgetting the past, but in accepting it and choosing to move forward. With each passing day, he became more attuned to his own needs and desires, understanding that growth often comes from the most painful experiences. He had learned that forgiveness, True forgiveness was an act of self-liberation, a way to reclaim the future without being bound by past hurts. As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow over the world, Alex raised his glass once more, this time not just to the future, but to the strength he had found within himself. It was a new chapter, one that he was ready to write, one day at a time. And for the first time in a long while, Alex felt truly free.